Hello everyone, Shane Vance here. Now, in this villain ranking, I have decided to do animated duologies, movies that have one sequel that come after the first. Before I begin, here are at least 2 rules for the list. Number 1. No duologies from well-known animated companies like Disney, DreamWorks, Illumination, Sony Pictures Animation, for instance. No Angry Bird movies since the second was released by the aforementioned company. All movies must be from indeterminate animation studios. Number 2. All movies must have been released in theaters. Okay, now that all of that has been settled, let's start the list. Ripslinger from Planes. Ripslinger is a famous, arrogant racing plane who looks down on up-and-coming racer, Dusty Crophopper, on account of him being a simple farm plane and sees him entering the race as an insult to racing planes everywhere. So, he is determined to find a way to get Dusty out of the race, even if it means death. I know that a lot of people have unfavorably compared Planes to Pixar's Cars, with Ripslinger being a carbon copy of Cars villain Chick Hicks, but I'd like to take a minute to tell all of you how unjust of a comparison that is. Throughout the first Cars movie, Chick Hicks has been kept to the sidelines, because the movie is focusing more on Lightning McQueen's relationship with the town of Radiator Springs. And from what little we see of Chick, we don't really learn much about him other than the fact that he's a dirty racer who has been stuck in 3rd place for all the races he has participated in. He wins the race at the end of Cars after making the King crash, which also gives Lightning an opportunity to put what he has been learning throughout the film into action, all while Chick ends up being reviled for his cheating. Planes, on the other hand, puts a lot more focus on the racing aspect than Cars actually has, so Ripslinger does show a lot more character than Chick since he is given more screen time. Though in fairness to the people who have made the comparisons of the 2 movies, I will admit that Ripslinger does fall into the category of a generic racing rival. The hotshot who has won every race he was in, soaks up whatever attention he is given and is cruel to anyone who he considers inferior, all while growing jealous of a newcomer who steals the spotlight away from him.
Why are they wasting their time with him? He's a tractor with wings!
Plus, Ripslinger does resort to the most basic and overused strategies to stop Dusty from winning the race, which is to kill him or at the very least scare him into dropping out. Even the variations he does in hopes to achieve these goals feel kind of like he's beating a dead horse, like coercing Dusty's crush Ashanti to advise him to go through a dangerous way to get to a resting point, which backfires and causes Dusty to get 1st place, or having his minions, Ned and Zed, off him in the last lap of the race. Heck, even Ripslinger's weakness is pretty one note. What is his weakness, you may ask? He adores the attention so much that he slows himself down for no other reason than to have his photo taken, which Dusty takes advantage of to beat him. Yep, the movie decided to go the hare and the tortoise route and had Ripslinger be so cocky that he will win, that he slows himself down and gives a clear opening for any plane to pass him by just for the sake of his ego. One last grievance I have with Ripslinger is that his defeat in the end feels kind of tame in response to all of the attempts on Dusty's life. Spoiler alert for those who didn't watch the movie. His defeat is both losing the race and being publicly humiliated when he crashes into some portable toilets and gets covered in the car version of excrement.
Hey, Ripslinger, yeah, that's your name. That's some supersonic sewer sauce. Man, I thought about the Stinger Bunch was bad. Man, that's got nothing on you.
Granted, Ripslinger losing the race and getting humiliated like that is something that someone like him most definitely would consider bad enough. But you would think that his murder attempts would get found out and he'd go to prison or even get barred from racing. All that aside though, the only redeemable quality Ripslinger has as a villain is the performance he is given by voice actor Roger Craig Smith, who has seemed to channel the charisma from his role as Sonic the Hedgehog and placed it into Ripslinger since he does show a sense of charm to him.
You were built for racing.
Yeah, you know it!
Still, being a more active version of Chick Hicks and simple charm isn't enough to bring him out of the cliched villain category, hence why he is in last place. Mayor Percival J. Muldoon from the Nut Job Too Nutty by Nature. Mayor Muldoon is a greedy and self-serving mayor who seeks to bulldoze Liberty Park and wants to put up an amusement park in order to earn extra cash since he sees that the park is non-profitable. Muldoon is basically every greedy businessman trope rolled up into one. His first scene alone in the film is a testament to this.
Every square inch of this city is generating profits. How else could we skim enough off the top to build ourselves that private golf course?
Whenever we cut to a scene with the mayor, it's as if the movie isn't confident that the audience is aware of his villainy, so it repeatedly shows Muldoon doing or saying something shady, if for no other reason than to really hammer down that he's the one we're supposed to root against, and it just becomes tiring every time. Another thing that the mayor hammers down is the movie's themes of hard work and not taking shortcuts to achieve your goals, because when the mayor starts production on Libertyland, he uses unsafe materials because they're cheaper instead of more expensive but safer materials, and also orders the workers to hasten production.
Mr. Mayor, if we go any faster, we're gonna have to start cutting corners.
So cut them. I never liked corners. I prefer rounded shapes myself.
He barely even works as a mayor villain, because most of the scenes revolving around his authority as mayor are either cheap corrupt politician jokes or typical businessman villain tropes, like only inviting his fellow socialites to the grand opening of Libertyland. I found his daughter, Heather, to be a little more entertaining. Yes, she's pretty much the very definition of a spoiled brat, but the movie has fun with her brattiness and insanity.
Our castle is for body people only. Fine. We'll use our piranha teeth and chew our way in.
Despite all of my complaints though, I will give Muldoon credit where it's due. He is smart enough to hire a crazy but efficient animal control officer to take care of Surly and his fellow animals to stop them from disrupting production on Libertyland. Not just that, but he also manages to have a decent one-on-one fight with Surly near the film's end.
This is gonna be fun.
I put him higher than Ripslinger because at least Muldoon has a bare minimum of things to admire about him. Those only positives aside though, Mayor Muldoon is honestly as generic as they come. Boss Skua from the Happy Feet movies. In the first Happy Feet, when Mumble was a little penguin chick, he was confronted by a band of vicious Skuas. Their leader, the boss Skua, tells Mumble about how he was once captured and experimented on by humans, who he refers to as aliens. Despite having only one scene in Happy Feet, Boss Skua does actually play a role in the movie, even if it's not all that major. His story to Mumble is what sparks the penguin's discovery of what humans are doing to the Arctic's ecosystem when he becomes older. As a character, I would say that Boss Skua is a typical New York gangster type, given that he speaks in a gruff New York accent.
The flipperboids, that's you, eat the fish. Yeah. The flying boys, that's me, eat the flipperboid and the fish.
Him intending to eat Mumble is even treated like business as usual, and in all fairness, a predator like him needs to eat to live, especially since other sources of food like fish are getting more and more scarce because of human interference. Unfortunately, since he doesn't appear again in Happy Feet beyond that scene, I can't find any positives or negatives to his villainy. His return in Happy Feet 2 though shows off a more cruel side to him. You see, when Mumble's fellow penguins have just become trapped in their home when global warming causes the icebergs to grow to unclimbable rates, Boss Skua and his flock take advantage of the situation and see the helpless penguins as an all-you-can-eat buffet, as he and his crew decide to wait until all of the penguins die from starvation to fully enjoy them as their meal. This pretty much shows how much of a menace Boss Skua can be.
Hey! Pick on someone your own size, creep!
Oh, I will, Princess. I'll peck on you first.
However, the biggest reason why I put him down this low is because once Sven, Lovelace, and their friends come to bring fish to the trapped penguins, Boss Skua does nothing to stop them. You'd think he would take action in making sure the penguins don't get any food, but probably for story pacing reasons, he does nothing of the sort and kind of just complains about the whole ordeal.
Okay, so
they got themselves a temporary stay of execution.
To reiterate, it's this complete idle act of villainy, as well as him not appearing all that much both Happy Feet movies, and being a typical tough guy, that are all why he is this low on the list. Verushka Van Vine from Hoodwinked 2 Hood vs. Evil. Verushka was once Granny Puckett's friend and the sister of the Hoods, who always came in second place to her, which instilled a deep-rooted sense of envy towards Granny. Seeking revenge, she stole a sacred recipe for magical truffles from the sisterhood, but after failing to create the recipe, she teamed up with masterminds Hansel and Gretel to kidnap Granny into making the empowering sweets. First off, I know that a lot of people have gone on record saying that Hoodwinked 2 is one of the worst sequels ever made due to bad writing and straight-to-video looking animation. Personally though, I'd say that Hoodwinked 2 is average at best. While I think the first movie is better in all respects, the sequel at least makes an effort to tell a story, even though the execution leaves much to be desired. Verushka, though, is honestly one of this movie's problems, because she is the most pathetic villain I have ever seen. Sure, getting repeatedly overshadowed by your former friend must have been grating all things considered, but you'd think that she would understand that the point of the Sisters of the Hood isn't all competition but a serious responsibility. And her kidnapping Granny to make the truffles isn't just cruel, but incredibly immature.
I'll never play second fiddle to you again, Abigail. I've been number 2 long enough.
Most of her scenes just feature her nagging Granny to make the goodie, which gets boring very fast. I also wouldn't say she works great as a fairy tale villain either. She's supposed to be the witch who tried to eat Hansel and Gretel, only to end up being in cahoots with them since they are the real brains behind this conspiracy. So she's more of a criminal stooge with her identity as a fairy tale character being more arbitrary than anything. Also, the movie tries to give Verushka a redemption arc. You see, after Hansel and Gretel become giants when they consume the magic truffles, they immediately cut Verushka out of the plan and leave her, Granny and Red behind to get eaten by a giant spider. A while after this, Verushka decides to switch sides and becomes Granny's friend once more as well as tame said giant spider.
Turns out Bitsy here wasn't so bad after all. Just needed a friend.
Now, I love a good villain redemption story, but this one seemed a bit too rushed, because Verushka has spent the whole film thriving on her petty grudge against Granny and was entirely complicit in Hansel and Gretel's scheme with a smile on her face, but she never gets arrested for her crimes, which sours this turnaround. Getting into Verushka's positives, I'd say that voice actress Joan Cusack is at least making an effort to be entertaining.
Never studied with the Sisterhood of Kung Fu Bakers? Never learned the secret ingredient to an ancient recipe so powerful it makes one invincible? Darn, I really had a taste for that.
I also found her design to be decent as well. It's not too scary for a younger audience, but at the same time not too cute or nauseating for an older audience. Though, the scary mask might turn some people off. Those two good points aside though, Verushka would have probably worked more as a harmless comedic villain, but the film treats her as this diabolical individual with a very blasé execution. Margaux Needler from the Addams Family. Margaux is a real estate agent who stars in a reality show and prides herself on making the homes she sells as welcoming as possible. When she ends up finding out about the Addams family's eyesore of a mansion, Margaux is determined to drive the Addams out of her sight. To get her positives out of the way first, Margaux does do a lot more in terms of villainy than my previous entries. First off, she tries a more civil approach when first dealing with the Addams, though it's done in the most passive-aggressive and transparent way that makes her views on them clear, but they don't get the hint because the Addams are too blindly optimistic. Second, it is rather ingenious of her to spread a hate propaganda against the Addams and their relatives, who have all come to see a coming-of-age ritual called a mazurka, where a young male member of the family does a traditional sword dance to prove his worth as an Addams, and this soon causes her to lead an angry mob to force the Addams out.
Let's do this then!
It's locked and loaded, Margaux!
Let's go! Get him!
Fire!
With all that said, Margaux does have some faults that keep her from getting higher. First off, she has a bunch of cliched villain traits, like having a daughter that she either abuses, neglects, or bosses around.
I'm so glad you're exploring, Parker, but I don't have time to talk right now, sweetheart. Mama needs to help people.
I need help.
And as an influencer antagonist, she possesses a secret room that reveals she has hidden cameras all over town to spy on the community, which is not only cliched but pretty over the top if I'm being honest.
Hey, Mom! We were just looking for you!
What if I told you about Mommy's crafting room?
Even her defeat at the end is nothing to smile at either. After her attempt to kill the Addams fails and she ends up revealing her hidden cameras to the whole town, you'd expect for her to be arrested or even kicked out of the town herself. But nope, all that happens to her is that her show gets cancelled, which she doesn't even seem to care about, and she ends up dating Fester, who proceeds to be her partner in selling houses. If they were setting her up for a redemption arc, this is an even crappier one than Verushka's, and Margaux is higher than her. It's like everyone has decided that instigating a hate crime is no big whoop. Margaux does have her great points as a villain, I will give her that, but boy do her less than ideal qualities outshine her great ones. Dr. Cyrus Strange from the Addams Family 2. Dr. Strange is a world-renowned scientist who ends up taking an interest in Wednesday Addams when she shows off her animal transformation experiments at a science fair. So much so that he hires a fake lawyer to go after the Addams, who have gone on a road trip, to inform them that Wednesday is not their biological daughter, but rather his. While this Addams Family sequel is certainly the most least revered or even well-known compared to the first one, Strange himself happens to be one of the movie's redeeming qualities because as a villain, he's pretty dang chilling. For one matter, he very cleverly sends his two henchmen to find the Addams so that he can collect Wednesday, most likely to take any heat off himself. And when Wednesday ends up going to him voluntarily, after hearing that she may not actually be related to her family, Strange uses emotional manipulation to make Wednesday listen to him.
And when we receive the inevitable confirmation, I hope you'll reconsider what you told me at the fair about how your formula was a family secret.
I also like how demented he is for an Addams Family villain. Like how he uses his own family as test subjects for his science experiments.
Wednesday, meet my wife, Ingrid.
And he was even willing to use Wednesday's family as his next victims. He also gets a good fight with the protagonists when he transforms into a giant amalgamation of a whole bunch of different animals, and we see how much this guy means business.
I really should thank you, Wednesday. You've uncaged me!
Unfortunately, these are the only good aspects I can think of for Strange. For his less-than-ideal traits, I'd say that comedian Bill Hader sort of gives him this annoying nasally voice that you'd hear from a neurotic college student.
You, Cyrus Strange. Pleased to meet you.
Though admittedly, he does go full mad scientist ham when he catches the atoms.
Imagine how rich and famous we'll become, all thanks to your experiment!
To nitpick some more, his monster design is kind of silly for the most part, especially with the fact that his head is a chicken. Oh, and his defeat at the end just screams basic. Strange had the potential for a great villain in the Addams Family franchise, but he has some duds that hold him back. Hansel and Gretel from Hoodwinked to Hood vs. Evil. Hansel and Gretel are a pair of German-accented children who at first seem like kidnapped victims of the villainous witch Verushka, but it turns out that they were only pretending to be her victims to kidnap Granny Puckett to make the recipe for an all-powerful truffle that they plan on selling to fairy tale villains across the land. Now to discuss the elephant in the room, Hansel and Gretel have been criticized as ineffective twist villains. Going into my personal thoughts for a second, I was 14 when the movie came out in 2011, and I was actually pretty shocked with the twist when I saw it in theaters. Getting back to the twist, I will say that I can understand why a lot of people take issue with it since there have been no hints of them being the masterminds behind the movie's conspiracy, because the movie started with them acting all innocent with Verushka, even when no one else is around.
Oh, please, we did not mean to trespass into your delicious cookie house.
Yeah, we were only searching for goodies for this night.
However, I will say that I think that it was better for the movie to reveal their true intentions very early on rather than wait until the last minute to show their villainy. Because if the movie went that route, the twist itself would be an even bigger flop than it is. I will also admit that Hansel and Gretel are pretty dang entertaining as villains. For one thing, they carry their villain identity with the utmost passion.
Yeah, Hansel.
Yeah, Gretel.
We're evil. We're something else that rhymes with evil.
Their German accents are also a treat to listen to as well, provided by a very unrecognizable Bill Hader and Amy Poehler. I know I dissed Hader's performance as Strange in Addams Family 2 just a moment ago, but he does a much better job here.
What do you mean you had her then she got away? Disguises? Big fake beards? Oh, well, that's very understandable.
It's also rather ingenious of them to use their cute and harmless looks to keep any suspicion off them. Like when Granny's granddaughter Red and Wolf manage to reach their lair, Hansel and Gretel use this setback to their advantage and cleverly separate the two by using their innocent appearance and also trick Red into saying out loud what the secret recipe for the truffles are since. As established before when I talked about Verushka, Granny would not do so, which also shows that they are capable at adapting to any situation that comes their way. And can I just say how much more fun they become when they turn into giants after consuming the magic truffles and go on a rampage across town?
Oh, look, it's the tiny little people living their tiny lives. They have done nothing to deserve our hatred.
Makes our violence that's much more senseless.
I know, I love that about us.
All of those credibilities aside though, one problem that I have with them, well other than their twist villain status, is their defeat feels out of left field. You see, after stopping the good guys, Wolf seemingly tells them how to become utterly unstoppable like a total idiot by eating all of the truffles. They eat more, and it seems like they are going to win. But it turns out that eating more than one of the truffles ends up turning them into giant human beach balls. There was no foreshadowing to this defeat at all, so from the viewer's standpoint, it was just dumb luck that it worked.
Oh, schnitzel.
Hansel and Gretel do have a lot of good qualities as villains, but both their villainy being a twist and their defeat do drop them some points. Raccoon from The Nut Job. Raccoon is the leader of the forest animals of Liberty Park and has managed to earn their favor by acting as if he is taking their survival seriously. However, it turns out that he is actually hoarding a bunch of food from the other animals in order to maintain control over them. He also has it out for a selfish squirrel named Surly because he is more focused on helping himself and sees him as a threat to his leadership. To be critical for a second, Raccoon as a twist villain is handled in a very mediocre way. While he doesn't really show anything that immediately reveals himself as the bad guy, there's also barely anything that shows he's an altruistic guy either. His attempts to keep up appearances do feel kind of disingenuous if you are able to pick up his body language.
Oh, what is our food level now?
Pickings are slim this year.
I'm sure we could rephrase.
But since it doesn't reveal anything incriminating, it's barely anything to go by. But to get to his positives, Raccoon does show how cunning he is. Since he has the trust of all the forest animals, he cleverly uses their faith in him to his advantage. Like when Andy starts doubting him, he immediately pulls a believable explanation to save face, while also throwing his most loyal minion Mole under the bus. Now that's shifty.
He said it's you and Mole who tried to drown the bruisers.
But he's working for Surly.
What?
It's also kind of satisfying seeing his corruption get exposed as Surly has managed to gain the favor of the dim-witted park savior Grayson, and Mole to a lesser extent, to back up his previously doubted claims about Raccoon's deception. Raccoon is also backed up by a silent cardinal bird, who is also one of the few animals to realize his true nature but is incredibly willing to enable it. And in all honesty, there are some interesting scenes involving these two, with Raccoon's sophisticated-sounding tone of voice being coincided with visually by the Cardinal's stern, quiet expressions.
Have you forgotten my motto?
Raccoon also has this habit of collecting shiny objects. At first, this may seem like just a showing of his greed, but raccoons are naturally collectors of any interesting things, so you could say that Raccoon is pretty much in touch with his animal roots.
The shiny! Give it to me!
One last criticism I have to make about Raccoon is that him surviving that waterfall at the end feels incredibly like a slap in the face to the viewers. Yeah, Surly ended up being no worse either, but surviving a fall like that was really stretching the bounds of reality.
Any more big ideas?
Raccoon does have his negative points, but he more than makes up for it by actually having some dimensions to his character. Cad Spinner from Plains Fire and Rescue. Cad is the superintendent of Piston Peak National Park who seems more interested about the park's lodge than anything or anybody else. Cad sort of reminds me of a smooth-talking salesman, someone who butters up anyone who catches his interest just to appease them. The most defining character trait about Cad is how irresponsible he is as a park manager since he is more focused on one aspect of the park, which is, sorry to repeat myself, the lodge. Sure, it is important to maintain an established place of shelter for visitors, but you would think that he should also be held accountable for other aspects of a park like proper care for the land around it so that visitors can enjoy it. How much does Cad focus on the lodge? Well, the movie has Dipper deliver this line to say it best.
He got the Park Service to shift 80% of our budget to his lodge restoration project.
Cad is also shown to be very disrespectful to the people under his payroll, like mocking the firefighting vehicles just because he views their position in the park as less important.
Blade, can I explain something? Yes, I can. Look, spilling mud on people makes for sad campers. Big party at my lodge makes for happy campers. You understand?
Or acting rude to employees who work close to him.
Ranger Jammer, sir. 72 years at Piston Peak.
Pleased to meet you, Jammer.
Well, it's a true pleasure.
Bumper kisser.
The only sort of vehicles Cad seems to enjoy the company of are those with a higher status, like Dusty for being a world-renowned racer or his boss, the Secretary of the Interior, showing that at heart, Cad is a suck-up. Now you might be thinking that all of these traits just make Cad a jerk more so than a villain. Well, to anyone who didn't care enough to see the Plains sequel due to how uninteresting it sounded, I'm afraid Cad's cruelty doesn't end there. He ends up being the one responsible for instigating the huge forest fire in the film and does not evacuate his citizens when warned of it. When he does finally see how serious the fire is, he reroutes water from a fireman's pipe to the sprinklers to protect the lodge. Though it does lead to a satisfying moment when one of his subordinates refuses to put the lodge before everything else.
Now, are you going to do it, or do I have to do it myself?
In essence, Cad sort of becomes a jerk-to-baddie archetype, which is a valid method of executing a villain. Is he an example of this archetype done well? If I'm being perfectly honest, I'd say half and half. On one hand, he's got the makings of a good antagonist, someone who is detached from all sense of morality and caring about one thing and one thing only. But on the other hand, he's such a cartoony caricature of a sleazy boss that it makes him feel pretty one-dimensional. Not helping matters is how incredibly annoying he can get.
Could you hold on a second? Then fire the old lady and get somebody who can get them!
Even his penalty in the end is something that can give you mixed feelings because we are told that Cad got fired and he is now the ranger of a very hot park. But it would have been nice to see this firing for ourselves. Cad is decent for an antagonist in this obscure Plane sequel, but he doesn't have much flavor for me to consider putting him up higher. Boingo from Hoodwinked. Boingo the rabbit is a member of the community of animals in the forest who has a close relationship with the delivery girl Red Riding Hood. He apparently worked for the Muffin Man before the elusive Goody Bandit stole his recipes and forced him to shut down and forced Boingo to be the runner of the local cable car. However, it's later revealed at the end of the movie that he in fact is the Goody Bandit and has loyal minions in the form of a foreign ski team. Now, Boingo is certainly a very polarizing twist villain. Heck, the twist itself surprised me when I saw the film. Looking back at it years later though, I can't say if the movie left the audience any clever clues. You can either work out that he's hiding something since he conveniently shows up in every one of the main character stories, even though he most likely had no business being at those exact locations, if for no other reason to mislead the characters.
Maybe someday somebody will open up a great big goodie shop and we can all work for that little guy.
Or still be kept in the dark because all of these random appearances, while strange, don't immediately point to him being up to something. Regardless though, in spite of his lackluster twist, Boingo does show how smart he is as a bandit. He steals the recipes of every goody owner in the woods, and is smart enough not to leave any trace of him. His choice of minions who have a hobby of skiing is certainly bizarre, but these guys do prove themselves to be efficient henchmen, like participating in ski races to keep Granny out of the way while Boingo does his crimes. To the head ski man, Dolph, providing some muscle to Boingo when he needs it since, come on, he's a small bunny who realistically couldn't do this whole scheme alone.
He's standing right behind me, isn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Boingo also gets a very underrated villain song with Top of the Woods, an upbeat showstopper that'll end up getting stuck in your head.
Now I'm not a pig, but you gotta think big when you're competing with a girl in the hood. So you won't be a fan of my evil plan, but I'm gonna be top of the woods.
I also found Boingo's endgame to be rather disturbing for a film as lighthearted as Hoodwinked. He plots on using the cable car he runs filled to the brim with dynamite to blow up competing goodie establishments in order to make his own business and drug his goodies with an addictive substance, which will turn his customers into basically the kid-friendly version of drug addicts. Also, despite what I said before about Boingo needing muscle to help him in his conspiracy, Boingo shows that he is more than capable of handling fights, like how he manages to use his long ears as shields against Red while also using his long feet as weapons. I guess Red maybe gave him a karate lesson, since it's established she's well-versed in physical combat.
Oh, you best be fearing the ear, baby.
If there are any other aspects about Boingo to criticize, other than his execution as a twist villain, it would be his appearance in the sequel where he manages to have some contact with Verushka and how he played a part in Granny's kidnapping. Though if I'm being honest, Boingo just feels like wasted potential here, since he's mostly used as a For a Silence of the Lambs reference.
Hello, Clarice.
Who's Clarice?
She is. Hi, Clarice.
Enjoy the book, Boingo.
Boingo is just as flawed as both Hoodwinked movies, but he has enough redeeming qualities that make him eligible to be put this high on the list. Tibolt from Gnomeo and Juliet. Tibolt is a member of the Red Garden Gnomes owned by Mr. Montague, who are rivals to the Blue Garden Gnomes next door owned by Ms. Capulet. Much like the character from the original William Shakespeare play he was based off of, Tibolt is a very aggressive and cruel character, always ready to do damage of any sort to those who he carries intense resentment for. Heck, out of all the gnomes in the film, Tibolt is the one who is most passionate about the feud, whether it be riling up Gnomeo by cheating in a lawn mower race at the beginning of the film.
Tibolt, you just crossed the line. Yeah, the finish line.
Or smashing Benny's big hat after a failed attempt at messing with the Red Gnome's garden.
Ooh, that felt good.
Tibolt is the very definition of a bully, not caring for anyone's welfare and getting his kicks by tormenting them something fierce. It's even implied that his fellow red gnomes don't really hold him in high regard and only tolerate him because of their shared hatred for the blue gnomes.
Why would anyone do this to Tibolt?
Because nobody likes him.
I also have to appreciate English actor Jason Statham's performance as Tibolt. Statham is best known for playing Deckard Shaw in the Fast and Furious films, and Tibolt is sort of a kid-friendlier version of Shaw.
We're gonna have a smashing time.
Tibolt's lust for violence ends up being his undoing though. You see, once he and Nomeo fight on his lawnmower, the lawnmower ends up hitting a block and Tibolt is killed when he crashes into a brick wall, not unlike his literary counterpart. Though I'm sure most viewers will find this satisfying if they've had enough of him at this point in the movie.
Tibolt can't be with us anymore.
Oh, shut up.
The only criticisms I have with Tibolt is that because of said death, he doesn't really participate in the final battle. It could have been interesting seeing him trying one last revenge scheme that could have backfired in his face because of the giant lawnmower. That and he somehow manages to get revived and put back together. Not only that, but he also seems to be accepting of the truce between the two gardens, which is very out of character since he was the most advocate of their rivalry, and you'd think that the gnomes wouldn't bother putting him back together because of his cruelty. Tibolt as a villain is alright and better than all of my previous entries, but he isn't without his own set of faults. Noah the Elder from Happy Feet. Noah is the head of Mumble's penguin herd who sees his lack of singing talent and his tap dancing skills as irregular, since the penguins he leads pride themselves with natural singing abilities. In all honesty, Noah does act more like a jerk than an outright villain, since judging others for being different, while ill-advised, isn't necessarily baddie material.
So it follows. Dissent leads to division, and division leads us to doom.
In spite of that though, Noah does have a creepy cult leader vibe to him as he sings his praises to a false deity called the Great Gwyn, aka the penguin version of God, and who he believes has cut off their fish supply due to Mumble's tap dancing.
Do you not understand that we can only survive here when we're in harmony? When you and your foreign friends lead us into your easy ways, you offend the Great Gwyn. You invite him to withhold his bounty.
It's also kind of disturbing how much influence Noah has over the other penguins, as he also makes them view Mumble's abnormality as a curse. Even Mumble's own father is reluctant to go against Noah's wants because even he believes all of the nonsense regarding the Great Gwyn.
Please, son, you can do this. It ain't so hard. Don't ask me to change, Pa, 'cause I can't.
How attached is Noah to his beliefs? Well, when Mumble and his new Adderley friends claim that the fishing shortage was due to outside parties called aliens, Noah is insulted that Mumble would denounce the Great Gwyn's existence. Though once Mumble returns many months later with a tracking device on him that leads the humans to the penguins, Noah ends up being doubted by the very penguins who once stood by him, which is pretty satisfying to anybody who has had enough of this old jerk's crap.
Wait a second. You just said there's no such thing as aliens.
Well, there's not!
While he doesn't really get a comeuppance for his actions against Mumble and simply joins in on the fun, given that his belief system has crumbled and he now sees that he was wrong about Mumble, I'd say that's just as satisfying and he has become a better penguin by the sequel. The one thing that keeps Noah from getting higher is, as established before, he toes the line in terms of being an antagonist, but he does have so many cruel moments about him that most people would see him as such. Moriarty from Sherlock Gnomes. Clearly based on the famous Sherlock Holmes criminal, Moriarty is a pie mascot who finds enjoyment in causing harm to ornaments, garden gnomes especially. This makes him have a long-running rivalry with Sherlock Gnomes, the defender of London's garden gnomes. Now, for a majority of the film, Moriarty is absent. This is because at the start of the film, it would appear that Moriarty is gone for good when he supposedly ends up being crushed by a dinosaur skeleton at a museum after battling Sherlock. While we later find out that he's still alive, it's sort of the impact he's left after he seemingly died that I find fascinating. Sherlock has been growing restless for some kind of action to the point where he keeps unintentionally mistreating his assistant Watson.
I am not your punching bag. Don't be absurd, of course you are.
Moriarty ends up seeing this fracture in their relationship and decides to trick Watson into being his accomplice to capture every gnome in London where he keeps them in a seemingly fun hidden location, only to use the frosting from the pies that he's the mascot of to glue everyone on the steps underneath a drawbridge where they will be destroyed by said bridge once a boat he put the heroes on comes floating by.
And when your warship arrives, the bridge will raise up and the 500-ton counterweight will fall.
crushing the gnomes, making you the very instrument of their demise.
I also find it kind of entertaining on how Moriarty managed to set up every single one of these events with the utmost confidence regardless of how convoluted it seemed to be. Heck, that's one of Moriarty's traits. He tries to make things as insanely complex as possible. Even he admits to such when he reveals his plan to Sherlock, Watson, and Juliet.
It's got a double cross, it's got a triple cross, I was smashed, he was smashed. I mean, to be fair, it is needlessly complicated, but that's what supervillains do.
I know that Sherlock Gnomes has been criticized as an unnecessary sequel due to how one-note the mystery is, with Moriarty not actually being dead being one of those criticisms due to how out of left field it comes across. But if I'm being honest, I didn't think it was all that bad. When I first read the novelization for the film, I honestly thought Watson was going to be a twist villain, but he wasn't. But if they went that route, it most likely would have been a weaker twist, since the movie does leave some obvious clues that Watson is the one responsible.
It wasn't an M, it was a W for Watson.
Yes, Watson as a red herring has its own problems, which is why I think the filmmakers made the right choice in bringing back Moriarty. Not only that, but he does get a fun fight with Sherlock with him using a firework launcher as a weapon.
You're the only one who gets me, and I know you feel the same way about me.
Not true!
Moriarty is honestly one of the many redeeming qualities of Sherlock Gnomes, but as a whole, I wouldn't say he's perfect, but still good enough to make it to #1 on my list. And that's all the villains. Thank you for watching. I'm Shane Vance, and I will see you later.